Warriors, welcome to another week with the Love Your Life Show. Me, your certified life and wellness coach, Susie Pettit. I want you to try something for me this morning. Try saying these words: sex, sexy, sexual. If you're like most of us, you might feel a little like, oh, Susie, risque, okay, at best. Like, oh, okay. Or shameful at worst. And I am so excited to bring you this podcast episode because I have an amazing guest today. And she is one that is leading the field in helping us break this societal and generational programming and the messaging that we get around our sexuality, sex, sexualness, all those words, all the words. Okay. Today, listen in because Dr. Alexandra Solomon is here. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and an assistant professor at Northwestern University. I'm very excited to tell you about the class that she teaches there. It's always full. Okay. She is the author of Taking Sexy Back. Great book that I will have links to in the show notes. She also is the author of another great book, Loving Bravely, 20 Lessons of Self-Discovery to Help You Get the Love You Want. An amazing book. Both of them I recommend for everyone, okay? She writes a column for Psychology Today and is frequently asked to talk about love, sex, and marriage with media outlets, including the Today Show, O Magazine, The Atlantic, Vogue, Scientific American, and now we get her on the Love Your Life Show. So join me in welcoming this amazing woman, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Hey Warriors, welcome to another week with the Love Your Life Show. Me, your certified life and wellness coach, Susie Pettit. I want you to try something for me this morning. Try saying these words: sex, sexy, sexual. If you're like most of us, you might feel a little like, oh, Susie, risque, okay, at best. Like, oh, okay. Or shameful at worst. And I am so excited to bring you this podcast episode because I have an amazing guest today. And she is one that is leading the field in helping us break this societal and generational programming and the messaging that we get around our sexuality, sex, sexualness, all those words, all the words. Okay. Today, listen in because Dr. Alexandra Solomon is here. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and an assistant professor at Northwestern University. I'm very excited to tell you about the class that she teaches there. It's always full. Okay. She is the author of Taking Sexy Back. Great book that I will have links to in the show notes. She also is the author of another great book, Loving Bravely, 20 Lessons of Self-Discovery to Help You Get the Love You Want. An amazing book. Both of them I recommend for everyone, okay? She writes a column for Psychology Today and is frequently asked to talk about love, sex, and marriage with media outlets, including the Today Show, O Magazine, The Atlantic, Vogue, Scientific American, and now we get her on the Love Your Life Show. So join me in welcoming this amazing woman, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. And welcome, Dr. Solomon, to the Love Your Life Show. I am thrilled to have you here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you got to write a book called Taking Your Sexy Back and Sexuality?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to connect with you. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I've been working as a relationship therapist for a couple of decades now. But I've always worn a number of different hats in my career. So I'm faculty at Northwestern University. I have spent a number of years training graduate students to learn how to do couples therapy. And then I teach this undergrad class, which is such a treat. It's called Building Loving and Lasting Relationships Marriage 101. And it has been the most popular course on campus for a lot of years because where else do you get to spend 10 weeks talking about love and sex and pornography and breakups? And how do you know if you like somebody and the impact of the family you grew up in? So we've been doing really, really high quality sex and relationship education this is our 21st year teaching the class.
Wow.
So I was a grad student the first time we taught the class, and not a mother, and now here I am with an 18-year-old and 16-year-old. And then I think because of my passion for relationship education, I do a lot. The books I've written are, they're not academic books. They are books for regular people, not therapists, not academics. They are self-help books. And this is a long way of getting to your question about taking sexy back. But what I know to be true is that the topic of sex is shrouded in a lot of mystery, and it's a topic that has, we either get like stuck in a place of like titillation, where we talk about sex in really flashy, ways, or we use sex to sell products, or sex is really taboo, and it's shrouded in shame and mystery, and to ask a question, to even be curious, is to somehow be weird or perverted or wrong. And I know from all the years of doing what I've been doing that, when a topic is shrouded in shame and silence, it gets left, unattended to, unintegrated into our lives. And then the whole world of sex education is pretty messed up in our country. There, in most parts of the world. I think Northern Europe has got it figured pretty much figured out. But here in the US, I just was talking with a student last week. So she's maybe 21, and was at a public school just a handful of years ago, and in her sex education was forced to sign a chastity pledge where she promised her virginity to her future husband, and the number of things that are wrong with that, right? So to assume that she will A, have a husband, B, that her life partner will be a man, and C, that a public school system has any right to declare what and when and how she engages sexually with another person. So it just shows where we are.
Yeah,
right?
and
So
the shame, just that you would, I mean, that is the goal, that you are a good woman if you are chaste. And oh wow.
mhm. And then we
like, public school, you sure? Okay.
no, I asked her several times, Susie, because I was like, no. You need to run this by me again. You're saying this happened to your grandma, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
No. Okay, you're saying this happened in, I know there are many stories of this that happened, in a Catholic school, but to have heard it was, just a few years ago and in a public school. And it's not, I've heard many, many other stories about that, where maybe it's not a chastity pledge, but I heard another one recently where the, sex education teacher comes into the classroom with 2 gift bags, and one gift bag is beautiful, right? The tissue paper is just in prim and proper condition. And the other gift bag, she's run over it with her car, she's crinkled up the paper, and it's what sex educators now are calling an object lesson, where an educator will take an object and sort of hold the symbolism, right? So the lesson here is you have 2 choices of how you're going to enter your marriage, right? You can be beautiful and whole and sort of perfect, or you can be dirty. And so then we wonder why we have women who are decades into a marriage, haven't had an orgasm, have tons of resentment around sex. It's like,
and tons of resistance to even have the conversation with their partner. I love, so your book, Taking Sexy Back, is a wonderful place for any listeners or watchers that are interested. You have so many great questions in there that helped me sort of like, when was the first time I learned about sex? And thinking back to those early sex education classes. And I have, sons, and I really appreciate also how you address sex education, and how, I mean, it really is we do it in a very scary way, and a way that when I learned about it through your work, I was like, oh wow, that really does not set our boys up for, I mean, I knew it didn't set me up for a successful relationship, but can you speak a bit to that?
Absolutely. Well, you're right. I mean, I think that it doesn't get better for any of us until it gets better for all of us, right? And so we can focus on the problematic ways in which girls are taught that you are, I think many girls and women feel like there's this like tightrope between being a slut and being a prude, and neither one is particularly good, right? So it's like, what is just about the right amount of sexuality that would keep me from being criticized? But it doesn't, right? The messages we give our boys are equally damaging. So, sort of sticking with this kind of early messaging, when schools implement dress codes, right? Very often it will be about the width of her straps on her tank top, or the length of her skirt. And the message at least implicitly, but often explicitly, is that boys can't learn if they see skin. And what message? So it's giving the message to boys that your sexuality is wildly dangerous and not in your control, and therefore the world has to accommodate you, in fact, in order to just remove any temptation,
Mm.
rather than what we can do instead, which is just teach our boys. Of course you notice, of course there's interest, of course you can feel that energy in your body, and you can ground yourself, you can take a deep breath, you can redirect your attention. And those kinds of messages of normalizing, integrating, teaching boys the skills of how you work with the energy that's in your bodies sets boys up far better than to be, not just safe, right, and
Mhm.
respecting boundaries, their own and others, but also it helps them become good lovers, because a really good lover also knows how to hold his energy and hold space for a partner and be attuned to a partner.
Mm.
So there are ways in which those messages, don't create safety, and certainly don't create the pathways that lead to pleasure and really mindful sexual experiences.
Well, and I love, I don't remember if it's in this book or your other one where you speak of the core wound of patriarchy, and for men that they're then, unable to be vulnerable with their emotions, and that it's sort of this either or type place. And I love how you sort of highlight that in the sex education, and just that, men, they get this message that it can't, you can't be protected, and you can't trust yourself, and also that men's sexuality comes before women's needs to dress in a certain way, or to, that
Mhm.
here we go again with some of our messaging. and
Right.
and the difference, I love, this is what I was looking for, where you say sexual curiosity is normal, like normalizing that was not something that was messaged to me in my class. It was much more, a punitive, like, don't do this, this is dangerous. And this idea that, someone wanting to have knowledge about sex as is not the same as wanting to have sex. And I love that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I think, listen, as as a parent, I get it. Like, there's the fear makes sense, right? There are things that parents fear their kids experiencing, right? An unintended pregnancy, an STI, God forbid, an experience of sexual violence, either the perpetration of, or being a victim of. And so it makes sense that parents have fears, and parents oftentimes have their own traumas and their own shameful, or at least humiliating, stories
Mhm.
around sexuality. And when we as parents don't have that stuff integrated, then of course our messages to our kids are going to be fearful. And so it's sort of like, at what point do we break this cycle and try to have conversations with our kids that are a bit more nuanced, and that try to hold on to some degree of complexity. And the other thing about parents is that we're parenting a generation of kids who are dealing with things that we did not have to deal with, right? If one of us wanted to look at pornography, we had to figure out whose dad maybe has a dirty magazine somewhere, and how are we going to get the magazine, and
Where is it?
where is it, and how long can we look at it without anybody finding out? It was a serious
Yeah.
endeavor, right? And our kids, anybody who's whatever 26 and under, has grown up with high speed internet porn, available all the time. And I don't think we wrapped our heads around, what does sex education need to look like in
Mm.
an era of this much access?
Mm.
And I'm not anti-porn, but I certainly am anti-porn as education, and I'm anti-porn as a template for really wholehearted sexual experiences.
Yeah, well, and again, and that's, yes, because of what it models, usually this, yes, the male, um as that figure. But I guess, to speak to your point, that porn is available, and that porn is out there, and that curiosity is out there, and to be looking at how can we do this differently. I just want to bring up um your model of name, connect, change as a helpful tool to parents, because I'm sure they're like, okay, so how do we start, how do we start this different thing? And I like sort of having that awareness with myself, that if, my son brings something up, or, I work with middle school girls, if they bring something up, it is first to be aware of my own experience and then move forward. Can you speak a bit more about that?
Yeah. So name, connect, choose is our relational self-awareness expanding tool that,
Mhm.
right, that was introduced in Loving Bravely and appears again in Taking Sexy Back. And it's exactly what you're saying, that when our kids bring something to us or we discover something, on our kid's phone or whatever, that the first step is pausing. The first step is, which is so hard because when we get hit with something that feels frightening, that feels upsetting, that feels disappointing, the urge to act can feel very, very strong. And
Mhm.
so to slow ourselves down so that we can move through a process, name. And name is just literally telling the story as if you were a reporter.
Mm.
I was folding laundry and whatever the story was. And
Right.
then I saw this and then I felt this. So because therapists love to say, name it to tame it, that
Mhm.
our emotions are bodily shifts, bodily states. And then one of the gifts we have as humans is we're meaning making creatures. And so we can use a story, we can sort of put together a story that can help us at least bring the emotion from a 10, to a
Mhm.
5, where at a 5, at least we have some choices of what we can do.
Mhm.
And so the connect is being present to the emotion. I feel tightness in my chest. I feel the pressure of tears behind my eyes. I feel my palms getting sweaty. So just being present to what's happening in our bodies. And from that place of being grounded, being with our emotions, then we've got choices.
Mm.
Um, and to respond is different than to react, right? And from that place of really choosing and picturing what's the, if we're talking about something with our kids, like what's the outcome I want,
Mm.
what's the outcome I'm hoping for. And I think as parents, it's so easy for us to feel like top down, like I need to show my kid or teach my kid or advise my kid or direct my kid. And it's so brave to instead shift into, I need to hold space for my kids' experience and try to understand
Mhm.
what the heck they're going through.
Right. Well, and I think
Mhm.
so. I love, my listeners will know that I work with a thought model and that I am always talking about slowing down the roll from that, like think, feel, act. Think like, and this is exactly that.
Yes.
Like to just notice, say you are folding laundry and the phone falls out and it's on a porn site and it's that like, oh my gosh, my chest is conflicted, constricted. I'm feeling, rapid heartbeat. It's, naming, I'm feeling anxious, connecting, okay, this is because of my own experience, I don't know what to do, just sort of pausing and letting yourself have that option. And then maybe your choice is, okay, I'm going to go get this book Susie was talking about, and or I'm going to go look on Dr. Solomon's website, and this is okay, I don't need to take a reactive action right now, I can slow down a little, see that the urgency here, but just slowing that reaction down from a place of kindness to ourselves is, I
Yeah.
love that you speak of that.
Well, Susie, you're adding in a really important piece, which is from that slowing down place, then we can identify what ghost is in the room with us, right? Like what piece
Yeah.
of my reaction is informed by my own experience. And my gosh, I mean, I'm thinking about, this example with porn. So if I am a relatively newly divorced woman and part of the demise of my marriage was that my husband cheated or my husband was really, really wrapped up in a world of deceit and dishonesty and compulsivity. And now I see that my 15-year-old kid's looking at porn. Of course, there's
Oh, you're gonna jump right there. Yeah.
a
I
really
raised the cheater. Yeah.
giant ghost in the room.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's so, and so that I have a world of empathy for, in this example, we're using a woman who now is dealing with this issue that is supercharged,
Mm.
and it is hers to continue to her own process of grief, of being able to hold complexity so that she can resist the urge to project onto her son
Mhm.
this wound, and to really hold open the possibility that she has a chance to have a different kind of conversation with her son that may put him on a different path,
Mhm.
that may spare him the pain, of a future of sexual disintegration, which is what happens so much. So much of the pain of marriages that fall apart, of marriages that like cling by a lifeline, is that we don't have our sexuality integrated with us, right? Because we've spent so many years with it as a split off part of ourselves. And when whatever is split off is we are at risk of acting out around.
Can you speak more to that about how, like, sort of, how does the woman, I know that I, for myself, sort of split in that, like, sexuality. Can you speak a little more about how we do that as
Hmm.
women, most of us?
Yes, women and, women and, yes, I think we all, I think we're all at risk of like sort of splitting off our sexuality for all the reasons we're talking about, inadequate sex education and messaging from authority figures, that are
What
really
does
shame
that
loaded
mean,
and really,
like the split off, for someone who's like, what are they even talking about?
yeah. So, okay. So so sex is two things at once, right? Sex is a behavior. It's something that that we do. It's a set of, as I say to my college students, it's a set of licky touchy things, right?
I love
It's
that.
like something that we do. And it's also this arena that evokes such tender questions about what it is to be alive, right? Do you see me? Am I okay? Do I matter to you? Are we okay? And so it evokes tremendous vulnerability. And there are power dynamics woven into, there are power dynamics woven into any interaction between intimate partners, right? Like, what are we going to have for dinner? Or what temperature are we going to, put the room at on the thermostat? So there's always power dynamics in terms of who's able to determine what happens next. And so, of course, there are power dynamics in the bedroom, and especially for heterosexual people, the power dynamics are shaped by all the messages we've internalized. Like the heterosexual sexual script is so tight and it's so narrow and it's so much he's in charge
Mm.
and she is, her greatest power is the power to say no, right? Like that's really the ceiling of her power, is that she can be the gatekeeper. And both of those, like neither position is a wholehearted position, right? Both positions are sort of these splintered, split off positions where if she feels like all she can do is like say, okay, you can have sex with me,
Mm.
what's split off for her is her own appetite.
Mm.
If the most she can do is be like, okay,
Mm.
well, there's an entire arena that's beyond okay, that's about, oh my God, here's what I want. Okay, I have this really fun idea. Like, what I would love is for this to happen first. And then what about this? And I had this like really cool fantasy the other day. There's, that's all split off for her.
Mm.
And for him, the split is around, as you were saying before, vulnerability. So if he's been taught he should always want sex, he
Mm.
should know what to do, he should not have to ask for directions.
Mm. Yeah.
What's split off for him is his tenderness, his vulnerability, his ability to say, I'm so afraid of losing my erection. I'm so afraid of you not having an orgasm. I'm so afraid of hurting you. I'm so afraid of you not desiring me, right? All of this tenderness that is as real. I mean, men are as vulnerable, as emotional as women. We try to socialize the crap out of them so they aren't,
Right. Yeah.
but we're all just humans. We all have profound questions about our worthiness and our okayness, and we bring those into the bedroom.
Yeah. Oh, I just love, especially I love how you're talking about the vulnerability of emotion in terms of, the man, that he should know what to do. He should know how to please him. And then the fear that, oh my gosh, what if I can't please her? And not being able to open into that conversation. And then for the woman to just be, it's more, I've heard you say like sex is more performative of a like, okay, here I am, this is what I do. I'm a good wife. And in that heterosexual conversation. So what do you advise people who are looking for something a little different? Like, how do you start with that conversation?
Well, here's what I love is that, I think couples can really easily get into patterns of pretty subpar sex, it's totally understandable that if we don't go into intimate partnership knowing how to advocate for ourselves or knowing how to ask questions or knowing how to be vulnerable, the sexual script will become like just sort of a routine set of things that we can do where everyone feels just kind of safe enough, and it happens and we can check it off the list.
Mhm.
Um,
It's my first
which, okay.
done. Check off.
You know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's go make the lunches.
Well, and that's, I mean, I feel like that whole thing about kind of feeling like sex is like a thing to check off of the list, and we just have to do it so that we are okay.
Mhm.
Listen, there's an entire, when you look at the sexual, the body of research that's around sex, the question that researchers have most asked in their sex research is, how often are you having sex?
Mhm.
So
Mm.
the way that the research itself promotes the idea that like you just have to do it, just check it off.
Frequency is what matters, right?
Frequency
Yeah.
is what matters. It's only very recently that we've started to ask questions about quality of
Mhm.
experience. So I don't ever want couples to beat themselves up for being that way,
Mhm.
because what I know to be true is the researchers are also that way, right?
Mhm.
We are brand new in an era of being able to ask, what are you wanting in
Mhm.
sex? What's the emotion you're seeking? How do you want to feel? What do you want to feel in the space between you
Mhm.
and your partner? These are really beautiful questions, but they're not questions that researchers have asked. They're not questions we've been taught to ask. So, of course, in a relationship, the thing we do oftentimes is just get it done.
Mhm. Which is why I love, love, love your book and need to plug it again that people need to get because so much of what you do is turning that script specifically for the woman and my experience is turning it back to me and what, how can I take my sexy back without, any, who cares about my partner right now? And certainly after, my marriage ended, there was no, it was just me. And it's like, how do I come back and, I don't know what the word repair that split that happened, when I was younger and then in that first marriage into a place more so that I can focus more on the enjoyment and why would you, I'm a life coach and I'm so much like, why do we do what we do? Well, it's because we want to feel a certain way. So why do you have sex? Well, sometimes it's so you want to feel like, okay, I've checked that box, but we also are going to want it more if we're enjoying it.
Oh,
Um,
that's right.
and it's
That's
not
right.
just like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, like done that. Yeah. So, which is, so I guess to answer that question, how do you get started? It would be for, yeah, I guess, can you speak a little more about sort of that outside in or the inside
Yes,
out
that's
type?
right.
Mhm.
Okay, so if we're talking specifically about women,
Mhm.
I think part of, one of the things that I really experienced in writing this book was I moved waves of grief and rage through me as I wrote this book because of my own awareness of my journey and messages I had been carrying, but also just awareness of the collective and how common this stuff is. So I think in some ways the journey starts by just getting pissed and sad that something so basic as pleasure, feeling entitled to pleasure, feeling entitled to co-create really good sex was
Mhm.
never ever, you were never given that message that you're entitled to that. Like because to be pissed about it and to be sad about it, that at least starts to like push back against it,
Mhm.
right? So I
Yeah.
think that's a piece of it, right? Because by being like, no more of this,
Mhm.
no more just laying there and
Mhm.
getting it over with.
Yeah.
I deserve better.
Mhm.
So that sense of like deservingness, entitlement, exploration of appetite, which for women, I think anything that has to do with like appetite, hunger, and seeking, we also have had that drilled out of us, right? We've worked so hard on like restricting our appetites and I don't know. I just want this apple. This is plenty.
Sugar in here?
No, no, I'm off carbs.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful, it's a beautiful practice um, mindfulness is something that we hear so much about right now. But, we hear about it so much because it's so important. So just noticing what would feel good right now and going through the five senses. What would feel really good to touch? Like what kinds of clothes would feel really good on my skin? What would I want to listen to? What would feel really good to smell? Like what do I want to look at? What do I want to taste? So really like noticing, what is my body wanting?
Mhm.
And if we practice that, if we bring that into a practice outside of the bedroom, then we see the possibility that we could move that practice into the bedroom. The woman who wrote the foreword to Taking Sexy Back is a sexuality researcher, Dr. Lori Brotto, like one of the best. She's up in Canada. And she, the under, like low hypo sexual desire, like low libido, low sex drive is it's endemic among women, right? It is about half of women, especially when we talk about midlife women, about half are like, I mean, sex, I could like take it or leave it. And so her research was she taught mindfulness practices to women about just helping women be present in the present moment and dropping the story. And so for women around sex, the story during sex often is self-consciousness about body, right? Our own self-consciousness about our bodies, how we look, how we are feeling, for us at midlife, how our body looks a bit different now than when we were doing this 20 years ago. And then all of the like chatter. Did I get this? Oh, did I do this? Did I get this done? What's the day like tomorrow? Or chatter around, especially when women are in a spot. So oral sex, to receive oral sex is research has shown again and again and again, it's the most reliable route to orgasm. But oral sex, because it's so focused, right? So it is like, it's supercharged around allowing ourselves to be the entire center of the world, allowing ourselves to be our pleasure to be front and center. And so to enter that space requires the quieting of the chatter around, it's taking too long. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Because no orgasm has ever been like, oh yeah, no, for sure. Pressure us. The more you pressure, the quicker we're going to arrive. No, we love the pressure.
Yeah. Well, and I love everything you're saying, because this beginning step is allowing ourselves to receive, which is, in the, patriarchy is a heavy word, but in this, male dominated society where I coach a lot of women that are like myself, and like male energy was how we did it for the first part of our life. Like go, do, like just get it done and, check it off the box, whether it's sex or whether it's, I find like midlife myself for sure, just sort of lifting up and being like, oh my God, this isn't working. Like either, people are having physical diagnoses of like autoimmune stuff or they're just in these totally vacant relationships and feeling like, wait a minute, I followed the rules. Like I had the sex 2.2 times a week and I, got the college degree and I had the freaking dog and I am not happy. And so this lifting up and awareness of like, wait a minute, we matter. So that coming back together of the split, like coming back into, I call her your inner warrior. But I love how you focus on sort of outside of the bedroom too, because that is very much can be a big hurdle for people to be like, why does it matter what clothes I like or what paint color I want? Or because we've been taught, be a good girl, quiet, hush, and don't rock the boat. Like, this is a good color for you. These flowers are what we like. This is what we're having for lunch.
This is what
like,
we
shut
like.
up. Yeah. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. And also just, want to send some love to people who are listening who are like, I can't. And it's just starting somewhere is how you start, whatever is most comfortable.
Yes. And, as you talk about the inner warrior, what it reminds me is the inner warrior is not necessarily angry. So I think we fear that if we're not compliant, we're going to be like, quote unquote, a bitch, right? There's a lot of shades of gray. And what I know to be true is that when we can be grounded in our preferences, in our desires, in aligning our words with our actions, it basically shows our partner, like, here's where you can meet me, like meet me in this space. And then we go there together. So it's not about flipping the script and becoming dominant. It's moving towards presence. And if I'm present, then you can meet me in a place that actually is like, I'm lined up, I'm all matched up on my insides. And so if you can meet me there, now we can travel somewhere together. Because what I realize is I was meeting, I was on your schedule. Our sexual system was a sexual system that worked for you. And I thought that, that was what I was told would be to be a good girl. And so we both got fucked by the patriarchy.
Yeah, for
Can I say
sure.
that on your podcast? We
Yeah.
both got screwed by the patriarchy.
Yeah.
You, my darling husband, this didn't serve you either, because you don't want a vacant sexual partner. You don't want a sexual partner who's like, okay, just go ahead and do it, get it over with. And so I'm trying to be more fully here so that we can find a new way forward that really honors both of us. And I tell you what, when I get to do that work with couples, it can take a while for husbands because they can feel really terrible. Like, I didn't want this system either.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yes.
there's a grief of like, but I'm not an a-hole. I didn't like, I haven't want, no, it's nobody's fault. There's no blame. This is the way in which neither of us had the tools we needed. And so it's holding on to supporting some of his defensiveness. I've always wanted you to have lots and lots of orgasms. My gosh, your pleasure does matter.
Yeah. I
And
just
for
don't know how.
years,
And I
right.
don't,
And
I'm not
right.
able to show my vulnerability because I'm told that's bad. So I
that's
just
right.
doing what I'm doing. And until you speak up, what do I do?
That's right.
Uh,
Or I asked you,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
didn't have an answer.
Right.
But she didn't have an answer, not because she was holding out, not because she was being demure, but because she does not know what her pleasure is.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's another thing about sex ed that's completely lacking, like showing the female. You had something in your book about how many people really can like talk about what the female genitalia looks like, even on the external.
Right.
And the difference there with, yes, we know what a penis looks like, but do we know, even that it's called a vulva over a vagina? Like, what's the difference here? And oh my gosh, what's going on? Yeah.
I mean, that is so profound, right? The vast majority of us literally cannot find our clitoris. Our partners don't know where our clitoris. So this whole, there's a whole movement around clitoracy. Ian Kerner, I think, coined it first. Lori Mintz has been on a clitoracy mission for years. There are so many really, really wonderful sex educators now who are like, listen, y'all, like, the clitoris was not even fully diagrammed until just about 20 years ago. And so again, it's that mourning. It's mourning that the clitoris is not new. Women have had a clitoris for lots and lots and lots of generations of women. But if it's not honored and centered and valued and understood, women are going to have subpar sex. And then who the heck wants to do something that feels like?
Well, and for listeners, if they're, anywhere around, the 40s and 50s, that means that our sexual education did not include that knowledge. And so we really were taught, I wasn't taught anything about pleasure, but if I was, the message was it came from penetrative sex, which we now know, I will link Ian Kern's book in there. She Comes First. I love that. I actually have given it to my sons as they graduate from high school, because I'm like, this is but all like that, we know that that is a different way to approach sexuality. I mean, even this woman you were talking about who signed her chastity pledge, it's like that we just hold this penetrative sex as like the main thing in life, and here we are, it's like coming back around, but we don't know what we don't know. And I guess for just to have that openness to learn that if you're not having enjoyable sex, which I would say, most people are not, and feeling sexy, it's feeling, grounded in your sexuality, then that's okay. Nothing wrong with you. We don't know what we don't know. But that there are amazing resources out there for all of us. And your book is a place that I would start.
And that it's not right. And that it's not too late. It's not too late. And so that's right. I mean, the title is it's a sassy title, but really Sexy is it's about reclamation of it, right? Sexy is not a performance. It's not something that somebody else gets to determine about you. It's your own connection to your sexuality, which in the book we make it into a noun. We write about your sexy, like who is this part of you and what is she wanting and what's her story and what is she carrying that actually does not even belong to her, right? It was never hers to begin with, and what could she shed? To go back to the gal we were talking about before, my college student, she had no interest in sex when that chastity pledge was given to her. So she was not sexually active, but she knew this was wrong. And so she sat in the back of the classroom and she ripped her chastity pledge in half, Nancy Pelosi style.
Oh my gosh, go her. Yeah.
I was like, it brought me to tears when she was telling me this. I was like, I love that you knew. It wasn't because you were having sex and you wanted to like kind of, it created cognitive dissonance. It was just you felt in your bones that this is not for someone else to determine
Well, that's,
for
that's what we're
you.
talking about, this external and like telling us as
Yes.
people how we are supposed to be sexy or how our sexy versus us saying, inside out, like, this is what I want. This is what feels good to me. And that's so much of where our power lies. Wow.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
if
That's
I
right.
were to look over, I love this class that you teach at Northwestern. What are some of the, like, at the end of the class, what are, some of the big messages you get from students that are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this, or this was really life-changing for me?
That's a great question. I think that one of the biggest thing is that basically students have a chance they're doing two things. They're learning more about themselves, right? So it's a class that's about relational self-awareness, which is this term that I use that's about understanding who we are in the context of our relationships. So we look in the rearview mirror, we talk about their families of origin, the dynamics in the families they grew up in, the messages they internalize, because the more we understand our own, I call it like the love template, the sort of internalized network of beliefs, expectations that becomes the pair of glasses through which we do all the things, date and have sex and break up, and it becomes the framework that we have. So if we understand the pair of glasses that we are wearing, now we can make some choices about what we were saying before, like what's working, what's not working. So the biggest thing they learn is just how to understand themselves better and figure out what do they want to keep, what do they want to transform. But the other thing that they learn is basically systemic thinking. We teach them how to look at everything that happens in a relationship as a dynamic. Because what's so easy is, I've been married to Todd Solomon for almost 23 years. I could sit here and tell you all the ways in which, if he would just be different, if he would just, it's so easy to focus on the other person. Or I could tell you stories about how my own wounds, my own past, how I make things difficult in our relationship. But to get stuck in either blame or shame compromises intimacy. So we work again and again on how to look at the dynamics and the cycles and the patterns. And all of the relationship science has shown us, like all of the couples therapy, all the approaches to couples therapy have some process for doing that, helping people see how we play off of each other, how there's a choreography here. And so that's what that's the most important thing I want my students to come away with, because then we're not victims, right? We're not victims of what people are doing to us, or we also don't feel like too broken, right? Too broken to be lovable. And so we can look at the space between. Those are the two things that I really
Yeah, I thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I grew up in a codependent household. I like codependency was sort of and that idea that, like what he's going through, I need to either take responsibility for or blame, or, and your whole model for that as this, you're standing with the person, and that it's, him plus me equals us, not him versus me, or, it's
yeah.
this much less adversarial relationship. And that in itself transforms relationships. I love your model of that, the standing with, and that you're teaching that to the young generation is hugely helpful.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess listeners who are in longstanding relationships and they're feeling a lot of resentment in their life, and they're feeling lots of, anger and not feeling like they're misunderstood and heard, how would you advise them to start moving towards this more interdependent, less codependent state of being?
Yes,
Easy question.
that's a hard question. I mean, well, first of all, that, I of course will just shout out couples therapy. Couples therapy works. It is wildly helpful to have a third to triangulate somebody in and have them look with you at the dynamic. Todd and I have done couples therapy, at various points in our relationship. So as a couples therapist, even, it has been so helpful to bring somebody in and say, okay, so what's going on here? What are you seeing that we're missing? And that's what a couples therapist job is. It's not to decide who's right and who's wrong. Couples therapists are not judges, and they're not referees. They are just kind of in the dynamic with you, kind of shining a spotlight on it, inviting different ways to say things. And so the first thing I would do
I
is
would do
just,
that early, and absolutely. And I hear my listeners saying that their husband won't go. And
okay.
I hear them saying,
So I developed, so in January, we launched my first e-course, because the thing I've heard for 20 years is like, I want to take Marriage 101. How come I
yeah,
don't have a class like that? So we made Marriage 101 into an e-course. I call it
awesome.
Marriage 101 for the grown and sexy. And it's self-guided, and it's been really fun. I'm right in there. Each video and each handout has a comment section. So I'm in there every few days, commenting with people and engaging. I think once somebody has enrolled in that class, like, they're mine, like, I feel like if you've got email me. A couple weeks ago got on a Zoom with a couple who was taking the class. They were stuck on some concept. I was like, all right, we'll get on a Zoom and we'll figure it out together. So it is like, that's a resource. And I think sometimes for a reluctant partner, a course can be a bit less intimidating than therapy. And so, because I knew, Susie, that there was going to be a bunch of people like, I'm up for it, my husband's not, or my partner's not, there literally is a video called How to Invite a Resistant Partner into the Work.
Awesome.
So we do a
You
whole,
put that in the show notes. That is so awesome. And because I was gonna, what I guess where I go with that is if they won't do couples therapy, then you need to put in some boundaries and hold strong to the acceptable behavior of, and hopefully wait until that pressure gets big enough that he then either goes into his own therapy to figure out what his stuff is that he's bringing to the table, or then will agree to the couples therapy. But unfortunately, sometimes I just see people waiting too long. So I love that you have this option. But so that it's, because a lot of people are like, okay, I asked him to go to couples therapy, 7 years ago, and now he says he'll go, but I'm friggin' done with him. And so we'd like to get in there before that happens. And I love that you have that option, and your books are also the option there too.
yes.
You very much.
Well, and I will validate that it is a heartbreaking story I have heard a number of times, is that, she has been asking for this for years, and it's not until she's got one hand on the divorce lawyers, on the phone, about to call a divorce lawyer, that then he says, which is just, it makes me want to cry again about patriarchy, right? That we have, that men internalize these messages, not by their own choosing, but to, it's, if we think about it, we teach boys and men from a very early age, don't cry, never let them see you sweat, don't back down, don't show weakness. And then to enter a marriage, the exact opposite is required. And so it is, and oftentimes, yeah, the very things that they're praised for in work or in friendship then are the things that are just so problematic for an intimate partnership. And so this is why I feel like, I'm always thinking about how can more men, and I so value my male colleagues, who are walking the talk, right? Who are really showing different ways and modeling. I think that it's so much easier when a man can see another man stepping into vulnerability. It makes it just that much easier.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I love that model. My husband's a life coach and he works with men, and I love it. And I love the model that he shows this is, their stepdad shows to my sons in terms of vulnerability and openness and honesty, and a different way of relating. So yeah, I love that. I do want to finish with telling women, wherever you are in your relationship, that, to take this message and to really prioritize their relationship with their sexy, because the benefits there are profound. And yeah, I imagine that you obviously agree that sort of prioritizing that relationship and getting, my women are very busy and they're like, I don't have time for that. But what would you say if you had, a minute to give them like the pep talk, like, come on, ladies?
Yeah. I mean, I think the pep talk is, I get it. And, we are busy. And I think that I want to really also validate that resentment doesn't really help us. Like, resentment is a libido blocker. stress is a libido blocker. So I understand and I get that our sexuality is so kind of contextualized. And so the relationship work, kind of clearing the space between ourselves and our partner opens the door to sexual connection.
Mhm.
And sexual connection also opens the door to relational connection. So I just want
Mhm.
to also remind people that that arrow does go in both directions.
Yeah,
Um,
I love it. Thank you. Because it is anything they do to take care of themselves is going to help overall and to get them to feel better. So
mhm,
it's out of that resentment, out of that bitterness, out of that anger. Yes.
mhm, mhm.
Thank you very much for joining us. And I will have all the links to Instagram and to your course and the books because you just get it all, listeners.
Thank you for having me on.